each other's papers and basking in our mutual adoration of motels and tourism. So let me just switch PowerPoints here and we'll be up. You know, some people might think that motels is kind of a off-topic, kind of a strange fascination and not real history, but one of the two patron saints of Utah history, who I would say are Bernard DeVoto and Wallace Stegner. I just want to point out that Bernard DeVoto wrote an entire essay on Motel Town in 1953, and I recommend it to you. So motels, I think, are worthy of our attention. So is tourism. We pay into the state of Utah a lot less in taxes because of tourism. It's essential to the economic growth of our state and the Intermountain West in the 20th century. Every year, or in the last couple of years, over 20 million travelers visit every year. And in total, they spend upwards of $7 billion and generate over $800 million in taxes. In my 2006 article, Branding Utah, Industrial Tourism in the Post-War West, I told the story of the state's slogans and their importance in winning the bid for the 2002 Winter Olympics. But today I want to shift my focus to private efforts, away from government efforts to promote tourism to private efforts. And we've heard a great talk about government efforts, local government efforts, but the hospitality or lodging industry is what I want to talk about. And I'm going to argue that a handful of Utah-based entrepreneurs created a Western motel empire in the post-war intermountain American West. 3 motel men were active players in the early days of the motel industry. Ken Orton, founder of Desert Sun Enterprises in Arizona, Knell, Cedar City motel entrepreneur, and Earl Holding, owner of Little America and Grand America hotels excuse me, in Wyoming and Utah. While I do use the alliterative term motel men, their families were also instrumental to the success of their enterprises, but that is beyond the scope of this presentation. I just want to set out here my slides so I know when it's time to move forward. More than motel developers, all of these men expanded their empires into other economic sectors, each on a different scale. Utah-based resources of family labor and capital allowed these enterprising men to build local and regional economic empires throughout the West. By following their careers, we can trace the evolution of hospitality from the small mom-and-pop establishments to the corporate resort motels of the modern Mountain West. And this study is part of a larger book that I'm writing on the cultural history of American motels. And I'm arguing in this book that the motel was invented in the West and that the design and function of motels was distinctively Western. The history of Utah's motel men can enlarge our understanding of the influence of Utah on the expansion of the modern West through tourism, and I think bring a balance to our historical enterprise, even in this state, where I would like to see more attention to the 20th century. So a brief background on motels in Utah and invention of motels. Now, the word motel was supposedly coined in San Luis Obispo in 1926, but it was not commonly used as a term until the 50s. The predecessor to the motel was the tourist court, the offspring of the tourist camp, an evolution that Lisa Michelle illustrated so well in her article on St. George in the Utah Historical Quarterly in 2012. And before I talk about these men, I just want to show you a few 30s motels or tourist cabins and camps built in Salt Lake City. This is Utah Motor Park. Obviously, in a later age, the pool was built later, built by Salt Lake City entrepreneur George Lindholm. There were 125 cabins in the Utah Motor Park, and he also owned the Mission Motor Court with 44 cottages. So notice, they're cabins and cottages. And he was a forerunner of the motel men in the state. He argued in the pages of Tourist Court Journal that tourist courts have outgrown the gas station in the middle and we should move on, and that now people would just as soon stay in one of these places as in a hotel. Now that we have tile baths, now that we have hot showers and good beds. Now, I have not been able to find any surviving evidence of this place, but this is a place that will be familiar to any of you who drive up and down State Street, the Capitol Motor Lodge. And it was built by an immigrant from the Netherlands, Frank de Nictra, and he built this motel or motor lodge from the ground up. They hired an architect, they used pressed brick, and he built a service station in the middle. He thought that that was important. His important way of advertising was landscaping. So this precedes the neon lights to attract motel guests. And the wonders of Google, I did discover that an accomplice of Machine Gun Kelly stayed for 2 months at this motel. That's in the FBI vault. So some people were long-term residents. So these are two, again, the Capitol Motor Lodge is still there. Its sign has changed. It is owned by a Mr. Patel. What I like about this postcard, and God bless Ken Sanders for his postcard collection, is it shows you how close this motel is to the highways. 40, I mean, it just was a great, today we wonder why is it there in 1749 South State, but it was a great, great location. But I want to start with Ray Knell. And he was one of the first professional motel owners in the state. He built his empire in Cedar City, but he also played an important role in promoting the interests of motel owners in the state and region. He owned the El Rey Motel, and of course it's a play on his name, but of course El Rey means the king in Spanish, and picks up that Southwest flavor that Lisa Michelle talked about. He expanded, as World War II came to close, he expanded his tourist property to meet demand. In October 1945, he bought adjacent property along College Street and planned to add new wings on both the north and south, increasing the motel from 5 apartments to 20. Knell told the Iron County Record that the new cabins will be of the most modern type. So we have cabins playing several roles here. He engaged the services of Earl Woodbury and Anthony Atkins, owners of the Big Hand Cafe in St. George, to run his planned ultra-modern cafe on the south side of the motel lot. And you can see these wonderful pictures from the collection at Southern Utah University of him modernizing his motel. His motel was part of a business boom in Cedar City aimed at the influx of automobile tourists. 4 other motels were expanding to meet demand, including one by his relative Rugh and Knell at First South in Maine. The paper proclaimed in May 1946, and you just gotta love this tourist booster rhetoric. When these centers are completed, Cedar City will be able to boast of the finest tourist accommodations in this part of the state, with a sufficient number to provide excellent accommodations for a tremendous influx of tourists. As his motel business expanded, Ray became a community leader in Cedar City, a member of the Lions Club, the Chamber of Commerce, and director and then president of the Utah Motor Sport Association. In these positions, he brought business to Cedar City, including state conventions of Utah motel owners and the Lions Club. He was a longtime president of the Utah Motel Owners Association, and he also organized a Highway 91 Association to promote tourism from Nephi to St. George. From his position in Cedar City, Ray Knell wielded national influence in the founding of the Best Western Referral Organization. Now, if you were to get your hands on the official history of Best Western, it features M.K. Girton as its founder, with his daughter and descendants in prime of place. Born in 1892, in Liberty, near the Texas oil fields, Burton left home in 1923 for California. He went into business with his sister, and they owned 3 lodging properties in Long Beach. Typical was the Beach Motel, a small mission-style motor court opening in 1938 with 10 rooms. I'm showing this slide so you can see very prominently the Best Western sign in front of Knell's motel. In truth, Best Western was not founded just by Burton, but by a group of men, including Raymond Knell and John K. Ken Orton from Utah. The motel men hatched the plan for Best Western at a convention of the United Motor Courts held in Las Vegas in 1946. They were concerned that the UMC, with 500 members in 32 states, was too relaxed in its standards, and that, quote, the benefits it offered members were insufficient. So this group of entrepreneurs founded the rival Best Western, and they established standards of cleanliness and comfort in an era of improving amenities in the motel business. Best Western, of course, was a referral organization, so guests at any Best Western motel could ask the manager to make a reservation at another hotel for the next night. And this was a very valuable tool in an era when reservations were made by mail, if at all. The first guide advertised, "Why take the chance of getting poor accommodations? Let the manager of any Best Western motel make a reservation for your next night's stop and be assured of the best." As befits a founding member, Ray Knell traveled along Highway 30 as far east as Chicago to persuade owners to join Best Western. He also inspected the properties of other members in the same region or along the same highway to make sure they were meeting standards. Douglas Knell, his son, recalled, M.K. Burton expected the individual properties to watch out not only for their own property, but for other properties too. Knell was an early entrepreneur in the motel industry who kept his base in Cedar City, yet played an important role in launching Best Western and supporting state tourism efforts. Like Ray Knell, Arizona hotel entrepreneur John K. Ken Orton had Utah roots. He was born in 1906 in Sandy, Utah, the 11th child in his family. His interest in travel began at the age of 18 when he served an LDS mission in Tahiti. After his return from his mission, he married Frankie Graves and they had 2 sons, Ken Jr. and Russell. He attended a local business college, and in 1930 he joined the staff of the Improvement Era, the major magazine of the LDS Church. Within several years, he became manager. Upon the advice of church president Heber J. Grant, who wanted to see a competitor to Deseret Book, in 1942 he founded Bookcraft Publishing Company. The company's first publication, Gospel Standards, was a collection of Grant's conference talks. The second book, The Gospel Kingdom, a collection of talks by early church president John Taylor, and it was adopted by the church for all priesthood curriculum, really launched Bookcraft. And they also were the ones, of course, who published Mormon Doctrine. Soon the publisher found success in selling its books and magazines to the Mormon reading audience. Orton's son recalled, "It was a real family business in those days. Dad made the publishing decisions, Mother processed the orders, and my brother and I helped with the packing and mailing after school." In addition to his day job managing the Improvement Era and running Bookcraft, Ken Orton got into the motel business. In the late 1930s, he owned 2 small motels in Salt Lake City, the 13-room Ken Ray and the 17-room Traveler's Motor Lodge. I have not found those motels in the present. At a gathering in Denver in 1943, Orton, who was by then president of the Utah Motel Association, was among those from 17 states who organized the American Motor Hotel Association. He was selected as president with the goal of lobbying more effectively in Washington, D.C. to fight rent control regulations that cut into the profits of motel owners by making motels offer lower rates to provide housing. And he ultimately was unsuccessful in changing what the government wanted to do, but of course the war ended and the regulations were lifted. ago. During the war, Ken went to Tucson to watch his nephew play in a football game for the University of Utah. Maybe it was the tropical climate, but more likely he was attracted to Arizona by the business possibilities then emerging in Phoenix. By 1946, he had sold his Utah motels, resigned from the improvement era, and found a partner to run Bookcraft, Marvin W. Wallen. The family moved to Phoenix and bought the 46-room El Rancho Motel at 1300 West Van Buren, enlarging it to 70 units. Orton found a partner in Phoenix, Al Stovall, who owned manganese mines, so essential to the war effort, and they built their empire in Arizona just as its winter tourism industry was taking off. Al with his mining millions and Orton with his expertise in lodging were well matched as partners in supplying rooms for the tourists who came to Arizona to enjoy the winter sun. Their motel empire expanded rapidly. The Mission Motel in East Van Buren in 1946, Royal Palms Inn on the Cook Estate on Camelback Road in 1947, and El Rancho Motels in Yuma and Needles, California. But they began to form their own luxury brand in the 1950s with the Desert Inn Motel. And I want you to notice this. This is a picture that was taken by Maynard Parker, noted photography. This is in the Huntington Library collection where I discovered it. One of the trademark architectural features of his motels was this weeping mortar. Another trademark in all the motels of his that I saw are those stair walls in the back. And of course, he has here in Arizona the palm and the pool. Their success was evidence of shrewd investment of outside capital in the hospitality industry. They applied modern business analysis to what had been more seat-of-the-pants operations. In 1952, they built the 180-room Desert Hills on East Van Buren on Route 60 into Phoenix from Tempe. And 2 years ago, it was still there, but it's now gone. So this is the Desert Hills, and then they built the Desert Inn. Of the Desert Hills, it was said, it was an outstandingly beautiful hotel with fine dining facilities, swimming pools, shuffleboard courts, and all the other accoutrements of a fine resort. The partnership was tested in 1953 when the LDS Church called Ken Orton to serve as mission president in Tahiti. Orton's son, Russell B. Orton, stepped in to manage the family motel portfolio. And a lot of what we know about these motels comes from letters that he and his father wrote back and forth while his father was mission president. Because of poor health, Ken Orton served only 18 months of his 3-year assignment. Upon his return, in March 1955, Desert Enterprises built the 107-room Hotel Desert Sun on Grand Avenue. So this is the Desert Inn lobby that was built before he left. And a beautifully appointed lobby, I do believe it is. Really a beautiful motor hotel. And then here is the lobby of the Desert Sun. And with its period carpeting. The newest star advertised in the Tourist Court Journal, the newest star under the Phoenix Sun, one of the Southwest's most modern motor hotels, the Desert Sun features 1955's finest conveniences. The distinctive rambling exterior, highlighted by a trapezoid swimming pool, is complemented inside by a large dining room, coffee shop, banquet room, lobby, and private dining room. As the headline made clear, the advertisement was really promoting Barker Brothers, and I have a picture of this advertisement here, a contract furnishing company out of LA who had furnished and decorated the hotel. Orton had relied on Barker Brothers to furnish his swanky new motor hotel, largely for the free decorating expertise, but also for their reasonable credit terms. And he provided a testimonial in the pages of Tourist Court Journal. Orton kept his hand in the Bookcraft publishing business in Utah and linked it to his motel enterprise. In 1951, he published Orton's Courting America, a guide to fine motels and hotels across the nation. Sign of the fluid nature of the hospitality industry at the time, the publications referred to lodging in an array of terms. motel, motor court, and the upmarket term motor hotel. Like Raymond Knell, Orton was at the founding of Best Western in the 40s. He remained a key figure and was named president of Best Western in 1957. So Orton now, at this point in time in the 50s, owned a flourishing lodging company in Phoenix. He was a publisher, he was an officer in national organizations. He was at the peak of his career and it was taking its toll. Perhaps a sign of his declining health or the 1958 recession, the partners sold all their other motels to fund the 3 Desert Enterprises properties. Orton and his wife sold their home and moved into a deluxe apartment in an addition to the Desert Hills. Their final project was the Tahiti Inn, no doubt in reference to his mission, opened at 2950 East Van Buren. Shortly afterward, in the fall of 1959, Orton suffered a fatal heart attack. He was only 53 years old. So in a decade in Arizona, he had built 3 distinctive motor hotels in a partnership with a wealthy man, the mining magnate Al Stovall. He helped bring Barker Brothers to Phoenix and set new standards of style for the motel industry. His Arizona empire of the Desert Sun properties passed into other hands as one son became a medical doctor and the other pursued a career in theater management that took him to Los Angeles and New York City. He actually was manager for Bobby Short. Orton's untimely death coincided with the downturn of the small family-owned motel industry. The end of the do-it-yourself era led to the shrinking of the number of family-owned motels, and small owners faced competition from chains like Holiday Inn and Travelodge. The number of motels peaked in the 1960s with 61,000 in operation, but by 65 began to decline. But in the 1950s, the future of the highway motel was still bright. Which brings us to our third empire builder, Earl Holding. And I just love this picture of him as a young man. I mean, he just is such a go-getter. You can just tell by looking at him. Holding died this year in April at the age of 86. And he granted interviews so seldom that his life is surrounded in mystique. His achievements are legendary, and his story of rising from the son of a custodian to number 139 on Forbes' list of richest men in America is truly astounding. I say this not to diminish his achievements, but to emphasize that he crafted his own legend and carefully. And that Horatio Alger-like story began with a motel in Granger, Wyoming, in this really bad postcard illustration lifted right from the net. But I did buy some of these postcards. But this is a really lovely early one. Earl Holding had grown up as a child of the Depression in modest circumstances, and his father did indeed run the Covey apartments for the Covey family in Salt Lake City, and you still see those, of course, on South Temple. Holding graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in engineering and worked a few years for the Bureau of Reclamation as a construction engineer. Turning down a chance to go to Iran with the Bureau, when asked by the Coveys to help with their Little America operation, he and Carol, married in 1949, moved up to Wyoming. And I'm going to rest here on this illustration. He conducted a long interview with Ski Magazine conducted a long interview with him in 2000, and he said, of Little America, it had been built a year or two before and was doing very badly. Later, I had a chance to buy part of it, then all of it. When he arrived, he recalled, it was a very small operation with 12 rooms and a cafe with 12 seats and service station. At that time, it also had slot machines. It was situated on Highway 30, and you could stay, he said, for $5 per night. Hamburgers were 35 cents, ice cream cones were a nickel, gasoline was 16 cents a gallon. At the Bureau, his salary was a little over $3,000 a year. The first year, his 10% share of the profits in the motel amounted to $200,000 or $300,000. When asked how he was able to turn things around, he said, and I quote, "We got rid of the poor quality employees and got some very good people in there." Or, as it was summed up in a Forbes profile of the near billionaire in 1994, of he and Carol, they pumped gas, made beds, and flipped burgers. Their work and the prime location of Little America spelled success. The motel was an oasis on a long and lonely highway, a travel stop that was clean and attractive with good service. Key to their success was the service station, and it's no accident that there was a postcard of their service station. Holding recalled, throughout the 50s and 60s, 52% of all the cars would stop there, and 25 to 30% of all the trucks. At one time, it was the largest volume service station in America. The Holdings installed 55 new gas pumps and built 100 new rooms. It was the need for fuel for all those cars and trucks that moved him up the ladder from motel owner to empire builder. He bought the Mobil oil refinery in Casper in 1968, and Sinclair Oil, whose sign you can see there in the postcard, in 1976. The profits allowed him to invest in hotels and resorts. First, he was able to acquire ownership of Little America in Salt Lake City. Here is an early picture of Little America, and then a later picture. You notice the hot shots there really started at Little America. So he bought the Mobil oil refinery, invested in these hotels and resorts. He bought the Westgate Hotel in San Diego for $14.7 million. During the 1970s, the Salt Lake Little America property was enhanced by a high-rise tower and banquet and convention spaces. And I'm going to put a testimonial in here for their pie, which we had a couple weeks ago in one of our academic meetings preparing for this, bringing the total rooms to 850. And a third Grand America property was built in Flagstaff, Arizona. In 1977, he bought Sun Valley Ski Resort in Idaho, a rundown property that had been a money loser since the Union Pacific Railroad sold it to California developer Bill Jans in 1964. Holding installed state-of-the-art snowmaking machines, threw out the old furniture, and re-roofed every building in the resort. Summing up his $100 million investment in Sun Valley, Holding said, "Everything I built it the best I know how." The same philosophy of building the best applied to his Utah properties. Snow Basin Ski Resort, bought in the 80s, and the Grand America Hotel. Bad internet picture. Here's a better one of a tourist posted on Flickr. She had a picture taken of herself there. And the Grand America Hotel built for the 2002 Winter Olympics. The interior of Grand America features Italian marble and French tapestries, and the exterior is clad in white Bethel granite, quarried in Vermont and fabricated in Spain. Holding built the hotel while on the Olympics organizing committee in the 1990s because, he said, the IOC didn't think there was a nice enough hotel in Salt Lake City. With the downhill races at Snow Basin and the elegant hotel downtown, Holding's investments were built and delivered an Olympic payoff, although he did resign from the organizing committee to avoid appearances of impropriety. Grand America, with its 775 rooms, crystal chandeliers, and luxurious furnishings, was the capstone to Holding's lodging career. Despite a stroke in 2002, until his recent death, Holding continued to manage his empire, including 400,000 acres of ranch land in northern Wyoming, his home state. And it all began with a 12-room motel in Granger, Wyoming. The story of these three Utah motel men illustrates the growth of the lodging industry in the 20th century West. In the 40s, Ray Knell, owner of a family motel in Cedar City, was instrumental in the founding and expansion of state lodging associations and Best Western. Ken Orton got his money in religious publishing and built a small empire of motor lodges in Arizona in the 50s while leading regional and national associations of lodging owners. Earl Holding obviously built the largest empire in the West. He started in 1952 with a motel and gas station 300 miles west of Cheyenne, and shrewdly invested in oil, ski resorts, and luxury hotels to end up with an economic portfolio unrivaled in his home state.